Deborah is a powerful and inspiring figure in the Bible, highlighted as one of the judges of Israel in a time of great spiritual and moral crisis. Her story, recorded in the book of Judges, reveals the strength of a woman who was called by God to lead her people in times of great darkness and oppression. More than a political and military leader, Deborah was a prophetess and a woman of deep faith, who did not hesitate to obey the voice of God and lead Israel to victory. In Deborah's time, Israel was in a chaotic situation. The people had turned away from God, worshiping false gods and falling into practices that distanced them from true worship. Because of this, God allowed them to be oppressed by powerful enemies, such as King Jabin of Canaan, who kept them under a cruel regime. Deborah appears in this scenario as a light in the midst of darkness, chosen by God to bring hope to the people of Israel. Deborah was truly a remarkable woman in her time, and her position as a prophetess and judge in Israel highlights her uniqueness. In a time when women were not generally in positions of leadership, especially in a society as patriarchal as Israel, Deborah stood out not for her physical strength or social standing, but for her deep connection with God. Her life was a testament to how God can use anyone who is willing to obey and follow his leading, regardless of gender or social status. As a prophetess, Deborah had the special gift of hearing God's voice and communicating his words to the people. This was an immense responsibility, as it meant that she was constantly in tune with God's will, being a channel of divine revelation. The fact that the people of Israel came to her for justice and guidance shows the respect and trust they had in her spiritual leadership. They recognized that Deborah was a woman guided by God, whose wisdom came from a higher source, and for this, she was widely respected. The description of Deborah judging Israel under a palm tree between Ramah and Bethel, Judges 4 verse 5, is symbolic of her impartiality and accessibility. The palm tree, a common and robust tree, represented the stability and justice that Deborah brought to the people. Under its shade, those who sought her guidance knew they would find fair and balanced decisions, for she judged not according to human wisdom but according to divine direction. The location between Ramah and Bethel is also significant, as these areas were central to Israel, making Deborah accessible to all the tribes. What makes Deborah's leadership even more remarkable is that she did not rely on military or political power. Unlike kings or generals, who often exercised authority through force, Deborah led through spiritual influence and obedience to God. Her authority came from her devotion and faithfulness to the Lord, which made her an effective and respected leader. The people's trust in Deborah was demonstrated when she called Barak to lead the army against the Canaanite oppressors. Barak, a seasoned warrior, only agreed to go into battle if Deborah went with him, demonstrating the importance of her spiritual presence and guidance. This shows that Deborah was not only a religious leader, but also a figure of courage and inspiration who motivated others to trust God and act in faith. Deborah's calling as a prophetess and judge reflects how God can raise up leaders from where they least expect it, and how he values obedience and faith above all else. She is a powerful example of how true leadership comes from a heart dedicated to serving God and his people, showing that with God on our side, we are capable of accomplishing great things, regardless of the limitations imposed by society. As a prophetess and leader, Deborah was constantly in tune with God's will, and when the time came to confront Israel's oppressors, she did not waver. God commanded her to summon Barak, a military leader, to gather an army of 10,000 men to confront the forces of Jabin, the king of Canaan. Deborah delivered this message with firmness and authority, without showing any sign of doubt or fear. When Deborah called Barak, she was doing much more than simply delivering a message. She was challenging the status quo and confronting the reality of an extremely dangerous situation. Jabin's army, led by Sisera, was powerful and well-equipped, especially with its 900 iron chariots, which put Israel at a serious disadvantage. However, Deborah was not intimidated by this disparity in power. She had complete confidence in God's promise that the enemy would be delivered into Israel's hands. Barak, despite being a seasoned warrior, showed hesitation in the face of the challenge. He did not refuse to go to battle, but he conditioned his participation on the presence of Deborah at his side. This reaction by Barak can be interpreted in several ways. On the one hand, it may reflect a lack of confidence in his own ability to lead without Deborah's spiritual support. On the other hand, it may also demonstrate the deep respect and trust he had in Deborah's connection to God. He knew that her presence would ensure that decisions were aligned with God's will, and this gave him the confidence he needed to face the enemy. Deborah's response to Barak was equally courageous. She agreed to go with him, but warned him that because of his hesitation, the honor of victory would not be his, but rather a woman's, Judges 4 verse 9. This statement not only foreshadowed Jael's role in defeating Sisera, but also reinforced the theme of the story, that true strength lies not in physical strength or military might, but in faith and obedience to God. Deborah was willing to face danger side by side with Barak, showing that her trust in God was greater than any human fear. Deborah's courage inspired not only Barak, but the entire army of Israel. Her presence in battle was a constant reminder that God was with them, guiding and protecting his people. This unwavering trust in God and the willingness to follow his direction, even in situations of great risk, make Deborah an example of leadership and faith. She teaches us that true courage is not the absence of fear, but the determination to follow God's will, even when the path seems difficult or dangerous. She demonstrated exceptional leadership by not shying away from danger, but rather placing herself on the front lines alongside Barak and the armies of Israel. In answering God's call to lead the people into battle against the Canaanite oppressors, Deborah not only delivered God's message but also actively involved in carrying out the plan, evidencing her unwavering trust in God. On the decisive day of the battle, Deborah stood firm and showed that, even in the face of the imminent threat of a mighty army like Sisera's, her trust was fully grounded in God. Seeing that the moment of battle had arrived, she did not hesitate to encourage Barak with words of faith and determination. "Arise, for this is the day in which the Lord has delivered Sisera into your hand. Has not the Lord gone out before you?" Judges 4 verse 14. With these words, Deborah not only affirmed her certainty that God had already secured victory, but she also inspired courage and confidence in Barak and all the soldiers who followed him. Deborah's presence in battle was a powerful testimony to her unwavering faith. She led not only with words but also with actions, showing that she was willing to risk her own life for the cause of God and his people. Her courage served as a catalyst for the army of Israel, who, encouraged by her leadership, advanced confidently against the enemy, knowing that they were not alone, but that the Lord himself was at their head. Deborah teaches us that true leadership is demonstrated not only in times of peace, but also in times of adversity. Her willingness to face danger alongside her people, trusting fully in God's provision and protection, is a powerful example of how faith can transform fear into courage and inspire others to do the same. Under Deborah's inspired leadership, Israel experienced a miraculous victory that changed the course of its history. The battle against Sisera, commander of Jabin's army, seemed an impossible task. The Canaanite army was formidable with its 900 iron chariots and vast experience in warfare, while the Israelites, on the other hand, were in a position of weakness, both in terms of numbers and weaponry. However, Israel's victory was not the result of brilliant military strategy or force of arms. It was, above all, a demonstration of God's power and faithfulness. Deborah had prophesied that God would deliver the enemy into Israel's hands, and this promise was fulfilled in a remarkable way. God intervened directly in the battle, causing devastating confusion in the enemy camp. Judges 4 verse 15 describes how the Lord defeated Sisera, all his chariots, and all his army with the sword before Barak. The confusion was so great that Sisera was forced to abandon his chariot and flee on foot, a clear sign that God was fighting for Israel. Deborah's leadership was crucial to this victory. Her trust in God, from the first call to the decisive moment of the battle, served as a guide and inspiration to Barak and the entire army of Israel. Her constant presence, both in word and deed, strengthened the faith of the people and led them to trust in victory promised by God. The victory over Sisera and his army not only freed Israel from Jabin's oppression, but it also had a lasting impact on the nation. It was a powerful reaffirmation that when God's people put their trust in him and follow his direction, no enemy force can prevail. This victory also served to solidify Deborah's position as a legitimate and God-chosen leader whose faith and courage brought deliverance to the people. At the end of the battle, God was glorified, and Israel experienced a period of peace after years of oppression. This victory was a reminder that God is faithful to his promises, and that he can use leaders like Deborah, who trust in him, to accomplish great things and bring deliverance and hope to his people. After the stunning victory over Sisera's army, Deborah and Barak raised their voices in a song of praise to God, known as the Song of Deborah, Judges 5. This song is one of the oldest and most beautiful worship poems in Scripture, filled with deep gratitude and recognition of God's power. It not only celebrates victory, but also serves as a powerful testimony to divine intervention and the importance of obedience and courage in the face of seemingly insurmountable challenges. The Song of Deborah begins with a praise of the Lord for his action on behalf of Israel. Deborah, as an inspired prophetess, recognizes that the victory was not the merit of the Israelite army, but rather the direct work of God. She declares, "Because the people offered themselves willingly, bless the Lord," Judges 5 verse 2. This verse highlights the importance of the people's willingness to stand up and fight, recognizing that it was God who gave them the strength and courage needed to face the enemy. The song goes on to describe the events leading up to the battle, the response of various tribes of Israel to the call to fight, and the way in which God powerfully intervened in the battle. One of the most striking aspects of the song is the description of how the forces of nature cooperated with the Israelites, with the stars struggling in their orbits and the river Kishon driving Sisera's chariots to destruction. Judges 5 verses 20 to 21. This poetic imagery reinforces the idea that the entire universe was aligned with God's will, working on behalf of his people. Deborah also celebrates the courage of those who stood up to fight for freedom and justice. She mentions Jael, the woman who killed Sisera, as blessed among women, Judges 5 verse 24, emphasizing that victory came not only through great warriors, but also through seemingly insignificant people who were willing to do God's will. The song, therefore, exalts the participation of all those who, in different ways, contributed to the liberation of Israel. Furthermore, Deborah's song serves as a reminder to future generations that the true source of victory and justice is the Lord. By singing this praise, Deborah and Barak not only thank God for what he has done, but also reaffirm their dependence on him for the future. The song ends with a wish that all your enemies, O Lord, may perish, but those who love you may be like the sun when it rises in its strength. Judges 5 verse 31. A powerful conclusion that reflects the confidence that good will prevail over evil when God's people remain faithful to him. The Song of Deborah is therefore much more than a simple celebration of victory. It is a profound expression of faith, praise, and recognition of God's sovereignty. It continues to inspire readers and believers today, reminding us of the importance of trusting God in all circumstances and celebrating his works with gratitude and joy. A singular figure in biblical history, Deborah left a legacy that transcends time, inspiring generations to live with faith and courage. As a woman of unwavering faith and fearless action, she stood out in an era when female leadership was rare, showing that God is no respecter of persons and can use anyone to accomplish his purposes. Deborah lived in a time of chaos and oppression, when Israel, alienated from God, suffered under the tyranny of its enemies. It was in this difficult context that she rose up as a judge and prophetess, guiding the people of Israel not only with wisdom but with a deep trust in the Lord. Her story is a powerful example of how true faith is demonstrated through courageous actions. Deborah's legacy is twofold: her spiritual leadership and her courage in acting. She not only listened to God's voice, but she also obeyed it without hesitation, leading the people of Israel to victory against a formidable enemy. By calling Barak to battle, accompanying him on the battlefield, and praising God for the victory, Deborah showed that true leadership comes from a life aligned with God's purposes. In addition, she challenged the norms of her time, showing that service to God is not limited by gender or social status. Her story encourages women and men to recognize their worth before God and to act with determination in what they are called to do. She proves that courage and leadership do not depend on physical strength or status, but on faith in God and a willingness to obey his voice. Deborah's impact goes beyond military victory. Her life is a testament to the importance of trusting God in all circumstances and acting boldly when we are called. The song she composed with Barak still echoes in Scripture as a praise of God's faithfulness and the courage of those who stand up in His name. To this day, Deborah is remembered as a woman who, even in a world dominated by men, did not hesitate to lead with justice and wisdom. Her example inspires people of all ages and genders to live with integrity and to trust that God can accomplish great things through those who have the faith and courage to follow His will. This woman's story remains relevant today, especially in times of challenge and uncertainty. Her life teaches us that true leadership comes from a deep connection with God and a willingness to hear and obey His voice. Like Deborah, we are called to be a light in times of darkness, to act with courage and to trust that God is in control of every situation. Through Deborah's life, we see that God is faithful to guide, protect, and give victory to all who trust in Him and follow His direction.